Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Sirhan on X, live from Cincinnati, Ohio, here in the United States. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful 5th of March 2025. Still can't believe we're into March already. It's been gone by real quickly. Excuse me. Because we just got into the 2025 New Year. Of course, we had a bunch of the snowy days here in Cincinnati where the days felt like forever that was going to end. Like we were never going to get out of the snow, but here we are. We're in the month of March already, and springtime is coming. Gee, the 60s and the 70s are supposed to come over to the weekend. So let's hope we can get some good weather finally all of a sudden. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful the 5th of March 2025, and hopefully it's in a good weather for you guys, and it gets coming here soon because we're having a windy day here, but after this, the spring weather is coming. But I'm going to get right down to it here real quick because the NFL got crazy today in terms of the offseason, whatever the frick you want to call it. So I'll just start with this one. Bit of a stunner this morning that I woke up to was Kansas City trading Joe Thuney to the Chicago Bears for a 4th-round draft pick. My guess is part of this had to do with the fact that the Chiefs were over the cap and they probably had to do some maneuvering, which I'm sure turnover was going to be coming soon because that's how the NFL salary cap works. I think for the Chiefs, they know they had to pay Trey Smith, and they have a couple other guys coming up soon. I think one of them was Trent McDuffie. There's another one. I can't think of his name. I think it's Karlaftis, the standout defensive end. So they probably just found some maneuvering parts they could probably trade along the way. Joe Thuney has been a fixture for Kansas City for the last few years, protecting the blind side of the standout quarterback Patrick Mahomes. Of course, he did in New England also with the great Tom Brady. So it's a good piece for Chicago to help protect the blind side of Caleb Williams, which the offensive line for Chicago was was terrible, especially in the interior where they just got bum rushed all season long. Maybe if you provide some stability there. The only question I have is why would Kansas only settle for a 4th-round pick? Because they could have gotten more out of this guy, given the contributions that Joe Thuney gave to that organization and his value to the team still. I mean, I get why they did it because I think now I think it's going to be like 32 or 33, something like that in the offseason. Maybe now you could probably get some value out of him before he starts to tremble downwards and he has no value left. But it's also the sort of same thing the New England Patriots did during the Tom Brady dynasty, during their first Super Bowl run. When it's time for a player to get enough value, they decided to part ways and trade him just simply because they don't want to lose basically players for nothing or low-value draft picks. That was my guess what Brett Veach was doing in Kansas City. And I've said all along he's probably the premier general manager in the entire NFL right now, and that's probably why he did it. I was a little surprised the value they got. They only got a 4th-round pick out of it because I thought they could have gotten more or maybe even higher for him. We consider what he brings to the table at the left guard position. Now, it fills that hole for Chicago. They're going to need a center at some point to fix that offensive line. But I'm sure Kansas is going to be fine. They're going to probably find someone to replace Joe Thuney, that left guard position. But I think a bigger need still is filling the void at left tackle, which is a bigger need because it was basically a turnstile of that position, and they did it by committee. Now, Thuney, later on in the season, did a pretty good job till the Super Bowl, holding his own of that position against some of the better edge rushers till the Super Bowl when he got basically just beat up by Josh Sweat. But then again, the Eagles' defensive front was one of the better ones in the league. So we'll see where this one goes. I expect the Chiefs to get that left side patched up and ready to go for the season. Brett Veach is going to do his homework. The Chiefs' offensive team and the offensive line coaches will do their homework to get the right guys there. And I expect them to get adequate replacements to start the 2025-26 season. So everybody's calling for the Chiefs' downfall. They're still going to win their 12 to 13 games. They're still going to win the AFC West. They're going to get adequate guys to replace the left tackle and Joe Thuney at left guard. They're going to be fine. But for Chicago, a very solid get, a proven vet who's a multi-Super Bowl winner, who knows what it takes to win at that left the offensive line, especially that left guard position. We consider he protected Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, going into protecting Caleb Williams. It's a solid get. We'll see where this one goes down the line. Then again, we were talking about the Bears, so they find ways to mess things up in other areas. But on paper for now, it's a solid get because Joe Thuney is a proven winner and a proven vet, especially that left guard position. Excuse me. Not too bigger news. Another one, maybe a bit of a shocker, but then again, maybe it isn't, because a lot of people thought, the Raiders and Maxx Crosby will eventually part ways. Turns out he got a contract in the area of the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL of the season right now when he signed the deal to a 3-year. I think it's like $106 million. Can't remember the guarantees. But it looks like he reset the market for the premier edge rushers in the NFL. We talk about guys like Trey Hendrickson, Myles Garrett, T.J. Watt, and of course, the standout Aiden Hutchinson in Detroit. Who knows with him with the awful leg injury. I should add I forgot to add him, of course, Myles Garrett in Cleveland, but we know about that situation. The market has been reset, and it looks like he's not going anywhere for the next couple years. So maybe it's a shocker, maybe it isn't, because there's all kind of speculation about the Raiders potentially trading Maxx Crosby all off season, especially last season, and it never happened. They basically agreed to this deal, which I'm sure Tom Brady, who now is the part owner of the team, basically said this guy's going nowhere, which I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. So Maxx Crosby is going to be a Raider for the foreseeable future, a top 5 edge rusher in the NFL. But resets the market because we have the situation with Myles Garrett in Cleveland and Trey Hendrickson in Cincinnati when it comes to his contracts, restructures, cap, et cetera, et cetera. And it's going to be a wild offseason because those two edge rushers are probably going to be paid top dollar now after what happened today, because the domino effect across the NFL with those two teams, especially at the edge rush position, is going to get real interesting. Now, of course, Myles Garrett already was out of Cleveland. We know the story with that. Trey Hendrickson and the Bengals apparently are apart on a dollar figure contract. But one thing to remind people in Cincinnati, he's still under contract for 1 more year. So you get him for the 2025 season. But I think after that, it's going to get real interesting because he's going to be 30. I believe he'll be like 32 or 33 going into the 26, that particular offseason. Can't remember which one it was. But it's going to get real interesting what they do, because now he's going to probably want top dollar after what Maxx Crosby got. But I'll remind people here, Maxx Crosby is going to be 28 when the season starts and that contract kicks in. A couple of these other guys are going to be in their 30s. It's a whole different dynamic. The only exception is Aiden Hutchinson, who's probably going to get a pretty sizable bag down the line. Assuming he comes back from that gruesome leg injury he had last season for Detroit. But it's going to be real interesting what the edge rush market's going to be moving forward, simply because that is what it's going to be. Now to another topic here that just broke about an hour and a half ago. Sort of not surprising is the Eagles paying Zach Baun, I think, a 3-year, $50-some-odd million contract. That comes as no surprise because the Eagles basically take care of their guys. They were talking about, maybe trading A.J. Brown, which I don't know where that's going to get them. But it keeps a defense intact, a defense that basically just stepped it up come playoff time, made key play after key play, all kinds of turnovers, and the leading force behind it was none other than Zach Baun, who they basically got on a bargain before the start of last season, and he basically just balled out in Philadelphia and got them to the eventual winning the Super Bowl in Philadelphia. And I think this is a well-deserved contract, well-paid contract to a very, very standout linebacker who I think has just been a hand-in-glove fit in Philadelphia for what they do. We consider the defensive front they have and the defensive secondary they have with guys like Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell. Of course, they let Darius Slay go, but they talk about bringing him back. Who knows? But a good contract for Zach Baun and a good contract signing for the Philadelphia Eagles. Keeps that sound defense attack, the one that led them to the Super Bowl last season. And they probably will be among the favorites to at least come out of the NFC at the very least. Of course, earlier this week, it was announced they also extended Saquon Barkley to a restructured contract, which made him the highest paid running back in history at the time. Kudos to him. He deserved it with the 2,000-yard rushing season he had. Well-earned, well-deserved. Shout out to Howie Roseman to basically make sure the players are taken care of nicely, paid ransomly, and basically they deserve it, especially after we consider how they went to the Super Bowl march they had this season. So kudos to them. Well-deserved. That defense is going to stay intact. You still have some of the key personnel. Now, of course, the issue is going to be what happens to Josh Sweat, who I think is an unrestricted free agent, who, of course, train wreck Joe Thuney in the Super Bowl to 2.5 sacks, among many other stats. But the Eagles are going to be here for a while. That defense is intact. Good, kudos to them for taking care of their guys. And on to some other news that came out not too long ago that I just read. Rumors are that I guess they're trying to keep some form of stability with an extension between the Pittsburgh Steelers and Justin Fields. I was on a NFL free agency show a couple weeks ago, and one of the tidbits came out simply was, who should Pittsburgh Steelers do a quarterback? My suggestion was to keep Justin Fields instead of going after these guys like Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, et cetera, for like a 1 or 2 year stopgap, which gets you nowhere. Of course, they tried it with Russell Wilson. We seen what happened there. I mean, it didn't work out in the end. I thought they should have stuck with Fields this season. Now, of course, it's probably because Mike Tomlin promised Russell Wilson his starting job. Possibly, again, I'm not a Steeler insider, so I don't know much about this. But it's possible he kept to his word and gave Wilson the job. But they should have kept Fields. They should have had Justin Fields playing throughout the season. And I expect him to keep, I got a comment here. Let's see, Steelers need wide receivers. Oh, yes. I'm going to get to the wide receiver market here in a second because they're going to need there's a lot of good ones coming up. So, but yeah, they're going to keep Justin Fields. So they'll probably get that stabilized. We'll see where that one goes. Which brings me to the topic this Tyrese mentioned to me, which I'm going to touch on now. The NFL wide receiver market just got crazy all of a sudden. You know, Tyler Lockett was released. DK Metcalf wants to trade. And I heard Christian Kirk was released today by Jacksonville, saving them money. And, of course, we know the situation with T. Higgins in Cincinnati, among many others. More and more is going to come, partly because of the, the salary cap that's going to take place in the League New York. I think it's a week from today. I should add also Devontae Adams was released from the Jets. He's going to be a suitor. The wide receiver market has just gotten hot out of nowhere when basically it was what's going to happen to T. Higgins and everybody else. Now, after today, it's gotten hot. It's a no-brainer. It has. I mean, I don't know where these guys are going to go. I'm not a forecaster. I do agree with him on Pittsburgh. They're going to need a receiver opposite George Pickens. Depends on what they of course, part of it depends what they do with George Pickens, because some people there are calling for him to be traded, which I don't know if I would go that far. But they do need receivers. Lockett's going to be available. Everybody's saying Devontae Adams. Possible he goes to a team out west, maybe San Francisco. Now, of course, now the 49ers are taking offers for Brandon Ayuk, which is interesting given the drama Brandon Ayuk caused in San Francisco last season for a contract. Everything he said he wasn't going to do this. Now he gets a contract. The 49ers give it to him. Now, after a dismal year, they're going to want him gone. But, of course, that's probably due to the fact they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy a boatload of money coming up. But, of course, probably the rest of it is I don't know, because John Lynch basically just want to clean house, I guess. But the NFL wide receiver market just gotten hot all of a sudden, and it's probably going to get hotter as the free agency starts, because it's going to be more trades. There's going to be more cuts. The fact that the Seahawks wanted to part ways with both their receivers and basically only have on their roster, I think, is Jackson Smith-Njigba, the one-time standout at Ohio State. And I don't know who else is on that roster at wide receiver, but we'll see where that one goes. But and of course, with this, all the restructures that took place today, a couple of them in Dallas with CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott, doing all the salary cap maneuvering, which is going to be interesting simply because, you know, they're getting ready for the league new year. As I said, the salary cap increase that took place is not going to amount to much because these players are now going to want a piece of the pie. We consider that some of these guys, especially Maxx Crosby, just already reset the market in their respective positions. Now, everyone's going to want pieces of the pie. We saw what Justin Jefferson did at Minnesota, and he reset the wide receiver market. Now the feeling is Jamar Chase is going to do the same in Cincinnati, which is what I expect when close to training camp and when the season starts. So we're getting to some very crazy times, and the official league New Year hasn't even kicked in yet. So fasten your seatbelts, the NFL community. This is going to be nuts. This is going to be crazy. Ooh. I mean, it's already started. They haven't even hit the official free agency period yet, which we know, I think the tampering period starts after the weekend. Wednesday, they can officially sign the contracts. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. Now to NBA. It was the other night that Kyrie Irving had his ACL tear declared done for the season. Unfortunate standout player. But I read an interesting stat the other day that over the last 6 weeks of the NBA season, he was among the league leaders in minutes played. And then I remind you, they traded, you know the story, they traded Luka Doncic to Dallas for Anthony Davis, an injury-riddled player at age 31. Of course, his first game, he injures himself. Yes, they should have started tanking the second they made this trade because they're not going anywhere. Now with Davis out, Kyrie out for the year, they're done. What's terrible about all of this is what nobody gets. And actually, Rachel Nichols brought it up, and I agree with. You traded a generational talent for an injury-plagued player at age 31. He's down for indefinitely. And then you run a 32-year-old guard like Kyrie Irving down with minutes played, and he's done for the year. And now at this point, you just got to tank. It's crazy what Dallas just did over the last month. And now there's a reason why their general manager, Nico Harrison, the moron that he is getting just trashed all over the place, rightfully and deservedly so. But yeah, they need to tank. They need to just move on to start this thing from scratch. They were talking about wanting to have an interest in Kevin Durant at one point, which makes no sense because I don't know who would want to go to Dallas after the bad business that took place at the trade deadline with the Luka Doncic, as well as among many other things. Now, of course, the guy you got to feel for is Klay Thompson. Luka just needs to get in shape. He does. Yeah, I love a Luka like you do, but I agree with you. He needs to get in shape. They said that's part of the reason why they traded him. Excuse me, but who knows? But yeah, he needs to get in shape because we know what he can do when he's in shape. A top player in the NBA, generational talent. But the way Dallas handled it was just terrible. So we'll be more talking about that down the line because I don't know what's going to become of Dallas. Reminds me of the years before Dirk Nowitzki came. If you remember those years when they were basically the welcome mat to the NBA, looks like they're going back to those years again because they're not going anywhere anytime soon. Good luck down the line, Dallas. Now to some boxing. It was today. There was announced. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm just going to go by what I read. That one of the so-called governing bodies mandated that Dmitri Bivol face David Benavidez. I gotta read this real quick. Oh yeah, Texas was too much for Luka to turn. Must have been some good ones over there, I guess. Must have been some good ones. Hey, I like some Mexican cuisine myself. I'll admit, I do too. I mean, when I get a chance to explore foreign foods, I like to do. I mean, I'm into Mediterranean and Italian. I do like some Mexican cuisines also. The Texas barbecue, yeah, it'll do it. I like it. I like you and I like your comment, my guy. Hope you're doing well, Tyrese. Hope you're doing well. But back to boxing here for a minute. The announcement of Bivol versus Benavidez. I'm 50-50 as to whether this fight will actually go through because there's the hubbub about wanting the third fight between Bivol and Better Beef, which I expect to take place. I wouldn't be surprised if this goes through and Better Beef takes a fight in the interim. I'm just not sold on the idea that David Benavidez can beat Dmitri Bivol, just simply because I wasn't thrilled with how he's looked in the last few fights, especially when he's gone up to light heavyweight. I mean, he went the distance with Gvozdyk and David Morrell, although now Morrell's a very, very solid fighter. I just can't see him beating Dmitri Bivol. And I understand how these governing bodies work as someone who's been around the sport for the better half of over 4 decades and has never been a fan of governing bodies. But I get why this fight may happen next, why it hasn't happened next. I'm just not on the David Benavidez bandwagon like a lot of people are. I mean, he's a good fighter. Don't get me wrong. He's a good fighter. He's undefeated. He's done something right. But there's no way I can see him beating a Dmitri Bivol because I think Bivol is going to basically just 1-2 him and just find a way to get a decision win. I think it'll be a good competitive fight. I think Benavidez can hold his own. But unless Dmitri Bivol just falls down and falls off the map some way, somehow, I can't see him beating I can't see David Benavidez beat him. Again, I'm 50-50 whether this fight really takes place because I know everyone, including myself, want to see the completion of the Bivol Better Beef trilogy, which is well deserved at this moment. But if we get this, I mean, that's fine. It's probably keep active fight for Dmitri Bivol. I'm sure Better Beef will take one himself before that happens, simply because, the trilogy has to happen probably some point this year before the year's out. There's no excuses as to why it shouldn't, unless Bivol or Better Beef just fall off the map and don't take their business seriously down the road, which, they're, excuse me, my apologies, where they're the two premier light heavyweights in the world at the moment. And they're very focused, as they showed going to the buildup of their two fights. And I expect Bivol and Better Beef to rematch before the year's out. But if Bivol goes through with a better Benavidez fight, I expect him to handle business. I expect Better Beef to take a tune-up fight in interim to handle business with whomever, and then we get the trilogy. Let's get the trilogy done before the year's out, and may the best man win. Winner take all. That's what we want. And one of the things I like to do, because I see a couple of you new people out here, just a brief introduction before I conclude with this, is I talk all kinds of sports, NFL, NBA, boxing, among many others. And with boxing, because we have some youngins who don't understand the history of the sport as much as I do, I like to do a historical moment, and that's what we're going to do here. It took place 54 years ago at this is the third incarnation of Madison Square Garden in New York City, which there's been many incarnations of it. Actually, this one I think was the first fight of this ilk. It was Joe Frazier against Buster Mathis Sr. Now, everybody knows the story here. Ali was stripped of his title because of reasons, and I don't use this platform to discuss those because it says fireworks. It's not who I am. Excuse me. Joe Frazier, we know he's a top 10 all-time great heavyweight, but sometimes I think he gets a little overlooked when we talk about some of the all-time great heavyweights, because for his time, he was a load. And we fought Buster Mathis Sr., a good fighter, basically who, not necessarily a physical specimen, but a very good fighter who brought decent ability. And he basically did all he could to hang around with Joe Frazier for the better half of this fight until Joe Frazier's body punching, who just broke down Buster Mathis Sr. And for his time as a heavyweight, Joe Frazier was a relentless body puncher. He would basically break down the tissues before he would land that Philadelphia-style left hook on you and basically not knock you out or stop you. And that's what he did to Buster Mathis Sr. on this night and became the NYSAC heavyweight champion. Basically, was classified as a world championship, which boxing politics, as I said, it's a story within itself. But it was in this day, Joe Frazier proved why he's an all-time great when he stopped Buster Mathis Sr. in the 11th round to win a heavyweight championship that was stripped by Ali for reasons, which, again, I'm not going to get into. Of course, a parlay to the fight March 8th, 1971, 3 years later when Frazier and Ali collided. It was billed as a fight of the century and lived up to it. And, excuse me. And for Buster Mathis Sr., a very solid career. Though he beat George Zavallo, a respected fighter. Just lost to the top guys. I mean, Ali and Frazier. Of course, the beating Ali gave to Frazier was so bad to where Ali wanted the referee to stop the fight, but he wouldn't do it. So Ali later backed off and let Mathis finish the distance to retain his title. His career, of course, ended in 1972 when he was stopped by the standout Ron Lyle in 2 rounds. But a very, very solid fighter, decent skills, didn't amount to anything much, but a rugged, tough heavyweight, who fought the best he could probably fight, amassed a solid record of 30-4. Of course, everybody knows his son, Buster Mathis Jr., who fought in the throughout the 90s, fought Riddick Bowe, Mike Tyson, and Lou Savarese, among others. Actually gave Bowe and Tyson decent fights for the brief moments he could until Bowe landed whatever the heck he landed on Mathis. And, of course, Mike Tyson stopped him in the 3rd round in 1995. Of course, that's the bloodline from Buster Mathis Jr. to Sr. But an interesting tidbit with Joe Frazier and Buster Mathis Sr., it was a rematch of a Olympic trials that took place where Buster Mathis Sr. beat Joe Frazier to be the one to represent the U.S. in the 1964 Olympics. but Mathis was forced to pull out because he broke his hand in that particular fight. Frazier replaced him, but Frazier himself had his own hand problems, but still managed to go through the U.S. tournament, went on to become the 1964 U.S. Olympic gold medalist at heavyweight, which is something nobody knows about Joe Frazier. We talk about the gold medalist who won Olympics. Joe Frazier won it in 1964. Something to think about here, as I mentioned this. I mentioned this a couple times before. In 1960, Cassius Clay, better known as Muhammad Ali, won the Olympics at the Olympic gold as a heavyweight. In 1964, Joe Frazier won the U.S. Olympic gold as a heavyweight. And of course, in 1968, George Foreman won the Olympic gold in the U.S. Olympics. Ali, Frazier, Foreman swept the amateurs in the 60s in the heavyweight division. You could probably argue they basically were the king of the crop of the 70s in the heavyweight division for at least the better half of the 70s. Of course, until George Foreman retired in 77. But think about that. From basically 1960 to 1977, amateur, pro, that particular 17-year period, the heavyweight division was controlled by three guys: Ali, Frazier, Foreman. Everybody knows about Ali winning the gold. Everybody knows about Foreman winning the gold. Few, if any, know that Frazier won the gold. That's crazy. And I said all along, when it comes to underrated all-time great heavyweights, Joe Frazier's name belongs up there because everybody still remembers him for, down goes Frazier when he fought Foreman, and of course the trilogy with Ali. But people forgot he beat Ali in 1971 in a fight where he basically just went all in and basically in a back and forth fight built as a fight of the century. Maybe you could argue the greatest heavyweight championship fight of all time. And basically won that fight. But you could argue that it probably took a lot out of Frazier because Frazier never got to that point ever again. But Joe Frazier, basically, his coming out party, you could argue, took place in 1968, 50 plus years ago today, at Madison Square Garden, when he stopped Buster Mathis Sr. to win a championship that was stripped by Ali for reasons, and the world was introduced to Smoking Joe. Now, of course, we know the deep tradition of Philadelphia fighters. I could go on and on with a boatload of these guys. Joe Frazier is probably the king of the crop. I mean, one thing I did not know is he was one of the ones that would jog up the steps and punch on meat carcasses the way you saw Sylvester Stallone do in the Rocky movies. Joe Frazier actually did that in real life. That's something I don't think anybody knows. Because when we talk about some of the all-time great heavyweights, Joe Frazier, in my opinion, he's a top 10 all-time great heavyweight. That's a no-brainer. I mean, of course, rankings are subject to opinion. I don't do my own rankings because there's too much criteria. But if I had to put a top 10 list, I would probably put the great Joe Frazier on it. I mean, I'm a barometer guy in terms of rankings, but I'm not in terms of actual rankings because there's so many things to consider. Because, all time you have to consider eras. Because a lot of this in the NFL and the NBA, excuse me, and even to an extent Major League Baseball, boxing, sort of same thing. I just don't engage because we see some guys have glaring omissions on those lists. It's more of an eye popper. Because I saw one earlier where I didn't see Larry Holmes or George Foreman on someone's top 10 all-time list. And they put Deontay Wilder and Alexander Usyk over Holmes and Foreman. We asked for an explanation. The guy never responded. I mean, come on. What's the criteria? I've always said when it comes to rankings, I do this when I'm in the NFL community. I do the same thing here in boxing. What's the criteria? We talk about. I'm talking about current rankings. I mean, I get it. It's one thing we talk about current rankings. I'm talking about trying to compare the 30s to the 40s to the 50s, on and on to today. How are you going to compare? How are you going to rank fighters based off of that? I mean, that's something I've always struggled to understand. I mean, the general sense, I probably understand it, but there's more detail that nobody is willing to answer to. It seemed like they want to just throw the list out there and say, this is my list. This is the correct list. Take it or leave it. That's fine. But remember, whatever list you want to put out there, you're always going to be subject to criticism. You're always going to be subject to nitpicking, especially in today's era where there's all kinds of information out there. But I mean, what I just crack up is how the ranking criteria is all over the place here. Because one minute, one guy has one set of rankings, second guy has a different set of rankings. There's no unanimous consent in terms of how these all-time ranks and all the all-time criteria is set. So I don't know. That's why I don't partake. I give a barometer of how I would rank. That's why I would say someone's in the top 10, someone's in the top 5, someone's in the top 7. But how you rank it is up to you. I just don't partake in it. I just look at the names there. And if there's any glaring omissions or something that needs to be called out, I'm going to be one that calls it out. Just simply because too many people, when they put the rankings, are so stuck in the recency bias, especially the ones that want to put Alexander Usyk among the top 10 all-time great heavyweights. Anybody knows me knows I am an Alexander Usyk fan, and he's my number one fighter in the sport pound for pound. But I said, if you're going to put him in the top 10 all-time, I better have a real reason from you as to why you think he belongs there. Because he's only had like maybe a handful of fights at heavyweight. Can't put him over the guys who had been heavyweights their whole careers and have had historical fights and historical moments of historical life significance over Alexander Usyk. And I hate to be an Alexander Usyk basher because he's my number one fighter right now in the pound for pound rankings. Those are some of the things I talked about today. By the way, real quick, shout out to you, Tyrese Bowie. I hope you're doing good out there. Thanks for the comments. Much love to you as always. I'll be chatting with you and everybody else here soon. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this edition of Sirhan on X. I will be back tomorrow night. I hope everyone has themselves a wonderful rest of the 5th of March, 2025. And I always say, and I close the show, always make self-care your number one priority in life. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else matters. Take care of yourself first before you take care of anybody or anything else. That's all I have to say. Have a good night. Enjoy the rest of the day. Take care, and God bless.